sister sent me a $10,000 therapy bill because she's super depressed that I got married before her. So here's the deal. I'm 27 and recently got married to my fiancé, Daniel, who's 28. I had no idea my sister, Stephanie, 33, would make such a huge deal out of it. She's been struggling with her love life for a while, and apparently, the fact that I tied the knot before she did is something she just can't handle. Growing up, Stephanie and I had a complicated relationship, though I didn't really realize it at the time. She's 6 years older than me, and while we were kind of close in some ways, she always had this habit of invalidating me. She was the golden child. She loved being the center of attention, and I was totally fine staying in the background. I was quieter and more independent, so I never really competed with her. I figured that kept the peace between us. Stephanie's love life has been a total roller coaster, and she just can't seem to break this cycle of failed relationships. She's been engaged multiple times, but none of them ended in a wedding. Her first fiancé was Mario, 35, and they dated for a few years. At first, they looked like the perfect couple, but eventually things fell apart. Stephanie was devastated when it ended. I remember her going off about how it was all Mario's fault. She said he wasn't ready to settle down, that he changed after the engagement, and that the whole thing fell apart because of him. Then came Teo, 49, who honestly seemed like a great guy, even though he was a bit older. He was charming, funny, and for a while, they really clicked. It looked like they were headed in the right direction, but it didn't work out either. Once again, Stephanie was heartbroken, but this time, instead of blaming Teo, she just talked about how unlucky she was in love. She'd say things like, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and, "I always end up with the wrong guys." The most recent one was Colin, 28. He honestly seemed like the one. Sweet, kind, just a good guy all around. They had a pretty solid relationship, and I was actually hopeful that this might finally be it for her. But after about a year, they broke up too. Stephanie was devastated again, saying, "I can't believe I invested so much in this. He was everything I wanted, but it just didn't work out. It was his fault, not mine." There was always an excuse, some reason things didn't work out, but never any real reflection or accountability on her part. She's stuck in this never-ending cycle of blaming everyone else for her failed relationships, never once considering that maybe she should take a good look at her own actions. When it came time for my wedding, she acted like it was the worst day of her life. She barely smiled in any of the photos and spent most of the reception sulking in a corner. She left early without even saying goodbye. At one point, she told one of our relatives how hard it was to see her little sister walk down the aisle first, because to her, it was some kind of competition. Anyway, after the wedding, things got weird. I started getting these super long texts from Stephanie, full of passive-aggressive comments about how I had ruined her life by getting married before her. She kept saying I didn't care about how she felt and that I had triggered all of her insecurities. I tried to be patient because I understood she was going through something, but honestly, it started to feel like she was blaming me for all of her problems. She even said, "You know I was supposed to be the first to get married, right? You just had to do it before me, didn't you?" Then, about a week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was a bill, for $5,000, from Stephanie, for therapy. It was addressed to me, and she said it was the least I could do after sending her into a deep depression by getting married before her. Let me be clear. I didn't ask her to go to therapy, and I didn't do anything to make her feel bad about her love life. So no, it's not my responsibility. And while I'm not saying therapy is a bad thing, it clearly hasn't helped. She said my actions destroyed her self-esteem and that I was the reason she couldn't get over her past relationships. I tried talking to my parents about it. My mom and dad, both 60, have always been super sympathetic to Stephanie. Every time she went through a breakup, they were right there, comforting her and telling her it wasn't her fault, that someone better would come along. But instead of helping her take responsibility, all that coddling just created this huge sense of entitlement. When I told them about the bill, they didn't take my side. They said I was being insensitive and a bad person for not helping her. They even said they were reconsidering the way they raised me because I wasn't supporting Stephanie through this. I told them it wasn't my fault and it wasn't fair for her to ask me to pay for her therapy. I said Stephanie should be talking to them about this, since they're the ones who raised her and enabled this pattern of dependency and entitlement. But they just kept defending her, saying I was being cruel and heartless. Honestly, the whole thing is ridiculous, but what really gets to me is how they're treating me now. Instead of celebrating my wedding, my parents and sister are acting like I committed some kind of betrayal. I talked to Daniel about it, and he's just as confused as I am. He said if the roles were reversed, he wouldn't even think about asking someone to pay for therapy, especially not over something as trivial as a wedding date. He's also really upset about the way my family is treating me. So now, Stephanie's still mad at me, and so are my parents. They keep telling me I need to be more understanding of Stephanie's feelings, but honestly, I couldn't care less anymore. I'm not paying her therapy bills just for living my life, and I'm definitely not putting it on pause to make someone else feel better. Especially when the therapy clearly hasn't helped at all. How do you go to therapy and come out thinking it's reasonable to bill your sister? I honestly think she got scammed. At this point, I'm not even sure she did go to therapy. But even if she did, with how deep her issues run, $5,000 seems like it wouldn't even scratch the surface. My parents still insist that she's the poor girl who got dumped by all her boyfriends, and I'm the one rubbing salt in the wound. I've started sarcastically asking them, why can't a wonderful woman like Stephanie find a man to marry her? They did pick up on the sarcasm, by the way. Now they're demanding I give her another $1,000 so she can do something nice for herself, like go to a spa. I told them sure, tell her to go ahead and send me the bill. Doesn't mean I'm paying it though. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe. New stories every day. Update 1. Here's what's been going on. Let me start with something I realized after all this happened. When I first started dating Daniel, Stephanie seemed to be supportive at first. She'd ask me questions about him and act like she was happy for me, but she'd also throw in little comments like, "Are you sure you're ready for something this serious?" Or, "Aren't you too young? How do you know he's the one?" As Daniel and I got more serious, she began making subtle jokes about how she should have gotten married first, since the older sister was supposed to lead the way. I laughed, thinking she wasn't serious, but in hindsight, it's not so funny anymore. Stephanie also said things like, "You're so lucky to have found someone already," or, "I wish I could just skip the dating part and find the right guy." Now I realize her mental issues were already starting to show back then. Anyway, here's what has happened more recently. We have a family group chat, and a couple of days ago I woke up to a ton of messages from my parents. In those messages, they were accusing me of ruining Stephanie's life because now she's having mental issues, which they said makes it even harder for her to find someone to marry. The worst part is that I agree, not with the blame on me, but with the idea that her mental struggles make everything even harder. If it was already tough for her before, now she wouldn't even bother trying anymore. They started off saying that my sister has always been there for me, which isn't true at all. They claimed she'd always taken care of me, which she never did. They went on to say that my decision to get married before her was a total betrayal, another stupid move. The message continued, saying it was selfish of me to get married in the first place, and I should have waited because the right guy for Stephanie was just around the corner. They even joked that someone should check if she's still alive because she still hasn't shown up. They felt that since I already had Daniel and our relationship was solid, I could have waited a few more years to give Stephanie time to find someone and have her big moment first. According to them, if I loved Daniel that much, waiting wouldn't have been a problem, and it certainly wouldn't have been for me, as her sister. I understand that some families believe sisters should get married in order, but that's not how I see it, and it's not something I care about. I'm living my life here, I'm not going to put it on hold just to spare her fragile feelings. Instead of getting involved in that mess, I chose to ignore it. I figured that responding, beyond what I already said, would just validate this ridiculous demand. Later that day, my dad called and the conversation was even funnier than their chat messages. He started by repeating everything they said in the group chat. He mentioned that they'd always expected me to do what was due, without even having to say it. I told him that I did what was due, getting married. I also pointed out how absurd that was, considering I had been engaged for a year and they were hands-on with every part of the planning. They helped me pick the venue, offered decoration suggestions, and even attended some of my dress fittings. And what was my dad's response? He said that they thought I was only planning a wedding that would take place a few years down the road. I mean, why would anyone spend a whole year planning a wedding that wasn't even scheduled for quite some time? I'm not crazy like my sister. I told him that didn't make any sense, but he insisted he couldn't be sure how serious I was about the wedding date. I reminded him that I was with him when I signed the contract for the venue, but he just brushed it off like it didn't matter. Probably because it was just to hold the spot, and the date could be pushed back. That's when my mom joined the call, all to say that they'd made a mistake by investing in my wedding. My parents had saved money for me to use on my wedding someday, but I hadn't touched a cent of it. I told them I had completely paid for my own wedding, and if they still had that money, they could use it to help Stephanie with her therapy or whatever else she needed. But when they saw they couldn't pressure me about it, they got mad because it wasn't really about the money. It was about the emotional side, something that doesn't have a monetary value. They claimed that the gesture of paying for her therapy spoke louder than money itself. I told them that paying for therapy now would be a long-term commitment because she would need a lot more. And if you add my parents' therapy to that, the bill would be astronomical. That sparked even more arguments because they said I wasn't taking the situation seriously enough. But I told them it was impossible for me to take it seriously when they weren't serious with their demands. I did mention that therapy for all three of us was something very serious. After the call, I immediately blocked both of their phone numbers. I also asked Daniel to block them because I didn't want them trying to manipulate him into getting involved. They haven't been able to contact me for the past 2 days. Now I'm bracing for a visit because I know that when people are desperate to reach you, they always find a way, and blocking them just makes things worse. I'm not sure if blocking them was the best move, but it's all I could think of at the moment. Update 2. Remember when I blocked my parents? Well, guess who I totally forgot to block? Stephanie. It completely slipped my mind, and I only realized it about 5 days ago. She called me 27 times because she thought I was ignoring her. Every call coming after midnight since her therapy still isn't working. I didn't answer and just blocked her number again. I didn't want any more interruptions that night, hoping she'd eventually get the hint and stop calling. But, of course, she didn't. Daniel, on the other hand, couldn't put his phone on silent because he was waiting for an important work call. They hadn't given him a specific time when the call might come, so he needed to stay available. He left his phone on sound, and Stephanie took full advantage of that. That's when I saw the 27 missed calls. Daniel ended up having to block her too. But that didn't fix anything. She wouldn't give up and had multiple numbers to call from. Eventually, things reached a breaking point. I was exhausted, and Daniel was already stressed, waiting for his call, so he finally gave in. I called her back, hoping that maybe we could resolve this and that I could get some sleep. What I didn't expect was the conversation that followed. As soon as she answered, it was clear she was pissed. Immediately, she started demanding $10,000 from me. Apparently, her therapy isn't working and she's still paying for it. She claimed she needed the money because she'd gone to more therapy sessions, and the cost was just piling up. First of all, I have no idea why she's going to such an expensive therapist if the results are so bad. Why doesn't she just look for someone more affordable? I'm sure there are plenty of padded rooms that cost a lot less. My reply was clear. I wasn't going to give her any money. She started crying, saying how unfair everything was. She vented and ranted about how her dumb, entitled little sister got married before her, and she just couldn't believe it. I told her that if I looked stupid, having her next to me would be nothing short of a miracle because she'd still be alive. I said I didn't have the time or energy to deal with her right then and that I needed to sleep. But she wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting that I needed to do something because she could no longer afford the therapy. She said that if I didn't help her out, her therapist might sue her due to financial problems. I told her, plain and simple, this isn't my problem. She should have thought about the cost before choosing such an expensive therapist. I added that if she called me about this again, I'd contact lawyers before her therapist. And that I'd end up sending her a huge bill, without any therapy attached. I blocked her new number immediately again. Right after I hung up, I tried to go back to bed, but I was too wound up to sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about how she managed to spend all that money on such a lousy therapy. I honestly think that if she had gone to Las Vegas for a weekend with a bunch of strippers, she might not only have landed a fiancé but also saved probably $9,000. Of course, that depends on how many small bills she used to make the deal. Update 3. It's been about 4 months now, and this update isn't entirely about Stephanie. A lot of other things have happened that aren't exactly related to her. A few months ago, I got the news that my dad had passed away, something none of us expected since he wasn't sick. The funeral was held at my parents' house, and both Daniel and I were there. As you can imagine, my mom was completely devastated. Losing Dad was something none of us could have predicted. Stephanie was there too, but she tucked herself away in a corner with some of our relatives. My mom was heartbroken, and even though our relationship hadn't been the best lately, I still felt sorry for her during that time. I don't know, I kind of saw it as if it were happening to me and Daniel. And even though neither of us plans on having a favorite child when we have our own, things got even more ridiculous because of what Stephanie did afterward. We were at my dad's funeral, and true to her typical form, Stephanie managed to make the whole event about herself. She didn't care about her dad being gone, or about our mom crying in the kitchen, or even about everyone else paying their respects. Instead, she was busy chatting with people about her failed relationships. The only thing that reminded her of my dad was that if she ever got married now, there'd be a big yes, as if her father couldn't walk her down the aisle. She blamed God for taking her dad too soon, and she even blamed the guys who promised her a wedding and then took that chance away. She said they played with her and robbed her of the opportunity to have her dad at her wedding if they'd just been honest with her. Her issues were still there, and I get it. I worry about people battling mental struggles, but a funeral is not the place for that. In the middle of everything, what she did was too much. I'm not saying my dad was a saint to me, but her behavior felt inappropriate, out of place, and completely selfish. What made it worse was that she wasn't keeping her thoughts to herself. She was telling everyone, and I heard her say it at least twice, to different people. I even heard someone mention that a dog on a skateboard would have been more fitting than her at that moment. I caught a few of my uncles talking about her, calling her selfish and saying she was turning the funeral into a personal show. I wasn't the only one who thought so, even though I've had my share of arguments with my dad in the past. I wasn't ruining things like she was. If my dad was watching over us, something I like to believe he was, I hope he was proud, at least in some way, that his golden child was making a scene at his send-off. It's like you get what you pay for. Your spoiled daughter ends up destroying your farewell. To my surprise, Mom didn't take Stephanie's side. She didn't say anything out loud, but she gave Stephanie this look, this expression of pure disappointment I had never seen before. It was almost as if she was finally seeing Stephanie for who she really is, and that was enough. Then, without another word, Mom just went back to her room in silence. Stephanie didn't know how to handle that, so she started yelling at Mom and demanding that she defend her. That's when one of the guests, a friend of Stephanie's who had come to pay her respects, stepped in and spoke up. I later talked with her, and she said she did it because she felt bad that a widow was being yelled at by her own daughter. She told Stephanie that it had gone too far, that she needed to stop making a spectacle at her dad's funeral. She explained that while she hadn't said anything out of respect, talking about herself all day was just awful. Then she added that the men weren't leaving her because they were trying to waste her time, but because they didn't want to waste their own time with her. Apparently, Stephanie had been unfaithful, and the guys left her to find a real relationship. Well, I guess she forgot to mention that to the family. And not only to me. Mom came out of her room when she heard all of this and asked if it was true. Stephanie started making excuses, saying it was because she realized they weren't serious or that she thought the person she was cheating with was the one. One of those was one of her later boyfriends, who hadn't known she was involved with someone else at the time. Mom ended up yelling at her to get out because she was staining my dad's memory with her infidelities and drama. Stephanie didn't want to leave at first, but several relatives asked her to because she was ruining everything. Eventually, Stephanie grabbed some food, threw it on a plate, and left. though she did yell at her friend that their friendship was over. I never imagined my dad's funeral turning into something like that, but it was quite the spectacle. I don't know what will become of my sister now, because we haven't heard from her in a long time. Mom isn't talking to her, and she isn't talking back. For those who think my relationship with my mom and dad got fixed just because of the funeral, they couldn't be more wrong. I only went because I respected those people who have treated me better than my own parents have. I still haven't unblocked my mom. She hasn't even apologized to me about anything, not even after what went down that day. Update 4. I've been getting messages asking if my sister has finally gotten married. I thought that after 5 years people would have dropped this by now, but for some reason, my story has become popular again. I think someone even made a video about her, though I haven't seen it myself. No, my sister isn't married. Yes, she has spent nearly $18,000 on therapy since that whole demand incident, but I don't even know if all of that money went toward actual therapy sessions, or if it includes lawyers, interest, and other fees. And still, she and mom aren't speaking. According to my mom, Stephanie ruined my dad's memory, and Stephanie doesn't talk to her because she humiliated her in front of everyone. I don't speak to either of them, and you already know why. Not even when my baby was born did I reach out. I didn't want Stephanie to use it as an excuse to say that, as the older sister, she should have been a mom first. Even though I'm sure she knows this, I didn't hide my pregnancy or baby for months. My mom has tried reaching out over the years, but never with an apology. Maybe she wanted to do it face to face, but I never saw that as necessary to have a good life.